If you've been searching for a probiotic that people often connect with gut health, belly fat, metabolism, digestion, women's health, and even stress support, then chances are you've come across one name again and again: Lactobacillus gasseri. But what exactly is Lactobacillus gasseri? Is it really one of the best probiotics for weight management? Can it support digestion? Does it help with the gut barrier? Is it useful for women's health? And most importantly, what does the actual science say? In today's video, we're doing a deep dive into Lactobacillus gasseri, one of the most talked about probiotic species in the health world. We're going to break down what it is, where it lives, how it may work, the most studied strains, what the research suggests about fat loss and abdominal adiposity, what we know about digestive health and Helicobacter pylori, how it may relate to vaginal health, stress, sleep, and inflammation, and finally, how to choose a supplement without getting fooled by marketing. And don't worry, we're keeping the science simple, practical, and beginner-friendly. Also, a very important reminder before we begin: probiotic effects are strain-specific. That means not every Lactobacillus gasseri product will do the exact same thing. One strain may be studied for body composition, another for stomach health, another for stress or sleep, and another for women's health. This matters a lot, and it's one of the biggest things supplement labels don't always explain clearly. Human and preclinical studies suggest L. gasseri may influence antimicrobial activity, immune signaling, intestinal barrier function, abdominal adiposity, and more, but the strength of evidence depends heavily on the strain and the health outcome being measured. So by the end of this video, you'll have a much clearer answer to one big question: is Lactobacillus gasseri actually worth your attention? Let's begin. What is Lactobacillus gasseri? Lactobacillus gasseri is a species of beneficial bacteria that belongs to the lactic acid bacteria group. It naturally occurs in the human body and has been found in places like the digestive tract, the urinary tract, and the vaginal microbiome. It is one of those microbes that scientists have paid close attention to because it appears to be especially adapted to the human host. That matters because a probiotic that is naturally associated with humans may be more likely to survive, interact with the body, and potentially produce meaningful effects. Though again, the exact outcome depends on the strain. Lactobacillus gasseri is often described as a probiotic because it may help the host when consumed in adequate amounts. Like many beneficial bacteria, it can produce compounds such as lactic acid, and some strains also show antimicrobial and immune-modulating behavior. Researchers have described L. gasseri as a human-associated probiotic species with potential antimicrobial activity, bacteriocin production, and effects on innate and adaptive immune responses. You may also hear people ask whether Lactobacillus gasseri is the same as other Lactobacillus species. The short answer is no. It belongs to the same broader group, but it is not the same as Lactobacillus reuteri, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, Lactobacillus acidophilus, or Lactobacillus plantarum. Each species has its own traits, and within each species, there are many different strains. Think of it like this: species is the family name. Strain is the individual identity, and in probiotics, that individual identity often determines the health effect. For example, some L. gasseri strains have been studied for abdominal fat and body weight, some for H. pylori-related gastric issues, some for vaginal health, and some for stress or sleep quality. So when a product just says contains Lactobacillus gasseri but does not list the strain, that's already a red flag if you're trying to match a supplement to a specific goal. The research literature repeatedly emphasizes strain specificity, and different L. gasseri strains have been investigated for very different outcomes, including abdominal adiposity, stomach health, vaginal health, and sleep quality. Another interesting point is that Lactobacillus gasseri is commonly discussed in the context of women's health because Lactobacillus species are central players in a healthy vaginal ecosystem. In many women, a Lactobacillus-dominant vaginal microbiome is associated with a lower vaginal pH and a more stable microbial environment. L. gasseri is one of the naturally occurring Lactobacillus species that may be part of this protective setting. Evidence reviews on Lactobacillus probiotics for vaginal health and more recent strain-specific work on L. gasseri support this relevance, although benefits should be framed carefully and not generalized to every supplement. So, at the most basic level, Lactobacillus gasseri is a human-associated probiotic bacterium with potential roles in gut health, metabolism, immune balance, gastric comfort, and women's microbiome support. And that's why it has become so popular. Why strain matters so much. Before we talk about benefits, we need to pause and discuss something extremely important: strain specificity. This is one of the most misunderstood topics in the entire probiotic world. A lot of people assume that if one Lactobacillus gasseri study showed a benefit, then every supplement with Lactobacillus gasseri must do the same thing. But that's not how probiotic science works. A probiotic species can contain multiple strains, and those strains can behave differently. They may differ in survival through stomach acid, ability to attach to the gut lining, antimicrobial activity, immune signaling, metabolic effects, and even the symptoms they may help support. For instance, Lactobacillus gasseri SB-T2055 has been studied in relation to abdominal adiposity and fat metabolism. Lactobacillus gasseri BNR17 has also been studied in the weight management space. Lactobacillus gasseri OLL27 sometimes called LG21, has been studied for stomach health, especially in relation to H. pylori and functional dyspepsia. Lactobacillus gasseri CP2305 has been studied for stress-related symptoms, bowel function, and sleep quality. Other strains have been explored for vaginal microbiota restoration or anti-inflammatory activity. This is why it is never enough to say, Lactobacillus gasseri is good for everything. The better statement is, some Lactobacillus gasseri strains have shown promising results in specific health areas. That is much more accurate. This also explains why real-world experiences vary so much. One person may take a supplement and notice better digestion. Another may notice nothing at all. Another may feel that it helps bowel regularity or bloating. Another may specifically be using a strain studied for metabolic health. If the strain, dose, duration, and person are different, the outcome may also be different. When you shop for a probiotic, try to look for the following on the label: full strain name, CFU count, dose per serving, storage instructions, clinical context, expiration date, not just manufacturing date. A clinically smart supplement label does not just mention the species. It should help you identify whether the product is linked to published research or whether it's just using a trendy ingredient name for marketing. This is especially important with Lactobacillus gasseri because the internet often presents it as a kind of miracle probiotic, but good science is more careful than that. The real promise of L. gasseri is not that it does everything. The real promise is that specific strains may do specific useful things in specific contexts. That's a much stronger and more trustworthy message. How Lactobacillus gasseri may work in the body. So how does Lactobacillus gasseri actually work? Let's simplify this. Probiotics do not work like drugs. They do not usually force the body in one direct chemical direction. Instead, they may influence the internal environment through multiple small mechanisms that add up over time. Lactobacillus gasseri has been studied for several possible mechanisms. 1. It may help support the microbial balance. A probiotic can compete with less desirable microbes for space and nutrients. Some strains may also produce acids or antimicrobial compounds that make the environment less friendly for certain pathogens. Researchers have described antimicrobial properties and bacteriocin-related activity in L. gasseri, which may help explain why it is studied in areas like gastric microbial control and vaginal ecology. 2. It may support the gut barrier. The intestinal barrier is often called the gut lining. It helps control what passes from the gut into the bloodstream. When this barrier is weakened, inflammation-related processes may become more active. Experimental studies suggest some L. gasseri strains may help preserve barrier integrity, influence proteins like E-cadherin, and improve intestinal health in colitis models. Broader reviews on probiotics also support the idea that probiotics can help maintain barrier integrity and modulate immune response. 3. It may influence immune signaling. The immune system and microbiome are deeply connected. Some L. gasseri strains may help tone down certain pro-inflammatory pathways or influence how immune cells respond. For example, studies involving H. pylori-related inflammation and other immune models suggest anti-inflammatory and immunomodulatory actions. 4. It may affect fat handling and metabolism. This is one reason Lactobacillus gasseri became so popular online. Some strains have been linked to reduced abdominal adiposity or altered fat metabolism, possibly through effects on fat absorption, inflammation, microbial balance, or metabolic signaling. That does not make it a magic fat loss shortcut, but it does make it interesting. Human trials and mechanistic work on SBT2055 support this area of interest. 5. It may communicate with the gut-brain axis. Some strains, especially CP2305, have been studied in the context of stress, bowel symptoms, and sleep quality. That suggests a possible role in the gut-brain connection, although this area needs more research and should not be exaggerated. Still, the emerging evidence is fascinating. So, the big picture is this. Lactobacillus gasseri may work by influencing the microbiome environment, intestinal barrier, immune signaling, and metabolic pathways. But exactly how much it helps depends on the strain, the dose, the person, and the health goal. Lactobacillus gasseri and weight loss, what the research really says. Now let's talk about the topic that made Lactobacillus gasseri famous online. Weight loss, or more specifically, abdominal fat and belly fat. This is where many headlines become overhyped, so let's be careful and honest. Some of the best-known studies on Lactobacillus gasseri involve the strain SBT2055, also called LG2055. In randomized controlled trials, fermented milk containing this strain was associated with reductions in abdominal adiposity, including visceral fat area in adults with obese tendencies. Additional mechanistic work has suggested effects related to fat handling and possibly lower postprandial and fasting non-esterified fatty acids. That sounds exciting, and it is. But we need to interpret it correctly. First, this does not mean every Lactobacillus gasseri supplement melts belly fat. Second, even in positive studies, the effect size is not the same as what you would expect from a major calorie deficit, an exercise program, or prescription obesity treatment. Third, probiotics may work best as support tools, not standalone solutions. There is also interest in another strain, Lactobacillus gasseri BNR17, which has been studied in overweight adults and in preclinical obesity models. Some findings suggest it may help with body weight or fat-related measures, but again, results need to be interpreted with caution and seen as part of a broader metabolic support strategy, not a miracle answer. Systematic reviews and meta-analyses on probiotics and weight control generally conclude that probiotic effects on body weight are species-specific and strain-specific, and that certain strains, including some L. gasseri strains, show more promise than others. But the overall field is still mixed, and many outcomes are modest rather than dramatic. So if you are asking, can Lactobacillus gasseri help with belly fat? The most accurate answer is, some studied strains may modestly support reductions in abdominal fat or support a healthier metabolic environment, especially when combined with diet and lifestyle improvements. That is a fair, evidence-based answer. Why might this happen? Possible explanations include better gut barrier support, lower endotoxin-related inflammation, altered fat absorption, changes in microbiota composition, and better metabolic signaling. Some papers on LG2055 specifically discuss improved intestinal integrity and reduced inflammatory exposure, while other work suggests effects on dietary fat absorption and emulsion properties. But a critical takeaway for your viewers is this. If someone is buying Lactobacillus gasseri only because of a fat-burning probiotic claim, they should slow down and look closely at the exact strain, the clinical evidence, the duration of use, and the expectations. Because supports a healthier metabolic profile is not the same as instantly burns fat. A good educational video should tell people the truth. Lactobacillus gasseri is promising, especially in the abdominal adiposity conversation, but it is not magic. Digestive health, stomach support, and H. pylori. Another major area where Lactobacillus gasseri has been studied is digestive health, especially in the stomach. One of the most famous strains here is Lactobacillus gasseri OLL2716, also called LG21. This strain has been investigated in the context of Helicobacter pylori, commonly known as H. pylori, which is a bacterium linked to gastritis, ulcers, and other stomach problems. Research has suggested that L. Gasseri OLL 2716 may help suppress H. pylori activity and reduce gastric inflammation. It has also been studied as a pretreatment or adjunct around eradication therapy, with some work suggesting improved efficacy or symptom-related benefits. This does not mean Lactobacillus gasseri alone can replace standard H. pylori treatment. That would be an irresponsible conclusion. H. pylori infections often require proper medical management, testing, and when needed, antibiotic-based eradication therapy. But a probiotic strain may sometimes be used as support, either to improve tolerance, influence inflammation, or possibly help the broader treatment context. That is where L. gasseri becomes interesting. Researchers have also studied L. gasseri OLL 2716 in functional dyspepsia, which is a fancy term for chronic upper digestive discomfort without a clear structural cause. Symptoms may include feeling full too quickly, bloating, upper abdominal discomfort, nausea, or stomach heaviness. Clinical work suggests that L. gasseri OLL 2716 may help improve some dyspeptic symptoms in certain populations, including both H. pylori-associated and H. pylori uninfected individuals. This makes Lactobacillus gasseri very relevant for people searching phrases like best probiotic for stomach health, probiotic for H. pylori support, probiotic for gastritis support, probiotic for bloating and upper stomach discomfort. Still, we need to be precise. The evidence is strain-specific and condition-specific. More broadly, digestive benefits from probiotics may also include support for microbial balance, bowel regularity in some people, reduced bloating in some cases, and improved gut comfort. Women's health, vaginal microbiome, and urogenital support. Lactobacillus gasseri is also important in the conversation around women's health, especially the vaginal microbiome. A healthy vaginal ecosystem is often dominated by Lactobacillus species. These bacteria help maintain a lower vaginal pH and create an environment that is less favorable to disruptive microbes. While species such as Lactobacillus crispatus are often especially highlighted, Lactobacillus gasseri is also one of the species found in healthy vaginal microbial communities. Evidence reviews on Lactobacillus probiotics in urogenital health, along with more recent L. gasseri strain studies, support the idea that L. gasseri can be relevant in vaginal microbiota restoration or maintenance. This matters because many women search for probiotics in relation to vaginal microbiome balance, bacterial vaginosis recurrence, yeast imbalance, urinary tract health, vaginal pH, and general feminine wellness. Now, an important distinction: not every oral probiotic automatically colonizes the vagina. And not every probiotic marketed for women's health has strong evidence. That's why strain and clinical design matter so much. Recent research on orally administered L. gasseri in women recovering from bacterial vaginosis suggests potential restoration-related benefits, including improved vaginal health markers after standard treatment. More recent work also explores specific strains like L. gasseri CECT 30648 in colonization and antimicrobial activity contexts. These are promising developments, but the overall evidence base is still evolving and should not be overstated. Lactobacillus gasseri may be a relevant probiotic species for women's microbiome support, especially as part of the broader Lactobacillus dominant vaginal ecosystem. However, if someone is targeting vaginal health, they should look for a product that is specifically formulated for that purpose and ideally includes clinically relevant strains. This is also a good place to explain that probiotics are not the same as antibiotics and not the same as antifungal medications. If someone has symptoms of infection, unusual discharge, pain, persistent odor, or recurring discomfort, they need proper medical guidance, not just a supplement. A smart wellness strategy is not supplements instead of diagnosis. A smart wellness strategy is use evidence-based support while also addressing the root issue. And that's exactly how probiotics should be viewed. Immune health, inflammation, and gut barrier support. Another reason people care about Lactobacillus gasseri is its possible role in immune balance and inflammation regulation. The gut is not just where food gets digested, it is one of the most important immune interfaces in the body. A huge amount of immune activity happens in and around the gut, So when a probiotic influences the gut environment, it may also influence immune signaling. Several lines of research suggest that L. Gasseri can affect inflammatory pathways or immune cell behavior. For example, experimental work shows suppression of pro-inflammatory cytokine production in H. pylori infected macrophages, and other studies suggest differential effects on innate immune function. Broader probiotic reviews also support the role of probiotics in modulating immune responses and supporting gut barrier integrity. What does that mean in simple language? It means Lactobacillus gasseri may help the body stay more balanced in how it responds to irritation, stressors, or inflammatory triggers. Though once again, this depends on the strain and the context. This is one reason researchers are also interested in L. gasseri in models of colitis and intestinal injury. Recent work suggests strains such as ATC-C3323 may help protect the intestinal mucosal barrier and influence E-cadherin-related pathways in colitis models. Other studies in animal models also support barrier-preserving and anti-inflammatory effects. Now, we should be responsible here. This does not mean you tell people that Lactobacillus gasseri cures inflammatory bowel disease. That would go too far. Instead, the accurate educational message is, Lactobacillus gasseri may support a healthier gut environment. Some strains show anti-inflammatory and barrier support potential. This makes it scientifically interesting, but it should be seen as supportive, not a standalone medical treatment. Imagine the gut lining as a protective border. It needs to let nutrients in while keeping harmful things out. If that border becomes weaker, the immune system may react more strongly. Some probiotics may help strengthen that border, and Lactobacillus gasseri is one of the strains researchers are looking at in that context. Stress, sleep, and the gut-brain axis. Here is a side of Lactobacillus gasseri that many people don't know about. Some strains have been studied in the context of stress, bowel function, and sleep quality. One of the most discussed strains here is Lactobacillus gasseri CP2305. Research and meta-analytic work suggest that daily consumption of this strain may improve sleep quality in adults with mild to moderate stress, and previous work has also associated CP2305 with stress-related and gut-related outcomes. This is one of the most fascinating examples of the gut-brain axis in probiotic science. The gut-brain axis is the communication network between the gastrointestinal system and the nervous system. It involves nerves, hormones, immune signals, and microbial metabolites. In simple language, what happens in your gut can affect how you feel, and what happens in your mind can affect your gut. That's why stress can trigger digestive discomfort and why gut health sometimes influences mood and resilience. Now again, we need caution. Lactobacillus gasseri CP2305 is not a sleeping pill. It is not a treatment for severe insomnia. It is not a replacement for mental health care. But the evidence does suggest that certain probiotics may play a supportive role in stress resilience, sleep quality, or stress-related gastrointestinal symptoms. Some Lactobacillus gasseri strains, particularly CP2305, may support the gut-brain axis and help with stress-related wellness markers, including sleep quality, but these effects are strain-specific and should be seen as supportive rather than dramatic. That is accurate, cautious, and still exciting. Can Lactobacillus gasseri help with bloating, regularity, or general gut comfort? This is one of the most common real-world questions people ask. Okay, but how will I actually feel if I take it? That's a fair question. For many people, the interest in probiotics is not academic. They want to know whether it might help with bloating, irregular digestion, post-meal discomfort, stomach heaviness, or general gut comfort. The honest answer is that some people may notice benefits, especially if the strain is well chosen and the gut problem is something the strain is relevant to. For example, the work on L. gasseri OLL2716 in functional dyspepsia suggests possible support for upper digestive symptoms, while CP2305 research has intersected with gut function in stressed adults. Broader probiotic literature also supports the idea that probiotics may help maintain microbiota homeostasis and gut function. However, probiotics are not always an instant fix. Some people feel changes within days. Others need several weeks. Others feel nothing because the chosen strain, dose, or condition is not the right fit. It is also possible to experience mild adjustment effects at first, such as temporary gas, mild bloating, a change in bowel pattern, or a brief period of adaptation. This is one reason why many practitioners suggest introducing probiotics consistently and giving them time, unless side effects become significant. Ask these 3 questions. What is my goal? Belly fat support? Stomach support? Women's health? Stress? General digestion? Does the product list the strain? If not, be cautious. How long should I try it? Usually long enough to match the study period or at least several weeks, unless a professional suggests otherwise. Food sources versus supplements. Can you get Lactobacillus Gasseri from food? In some cases, yes, depending on the product and manufacturing process. Some fermented foods or functional fermented dairy products may contain specific probiotic strains, and some of the best-known L. Gasseri studies used fermented milk preparations rather than capsules. For example, the abdominal adiposity studies involving SBT2055 were conducted using fermented milk containing the strain. That's important because it reminds us that probiotics are not only a supplement story, they are also a food story. However, the challenge is that most regular fermented foods do not reliably tell you the exact strain, the viable count, the amount at expiration, or whether the studied strain is present at all. So while fermented foods can absolutely be part of a gut-friendly diet, they are not always the best option if you want a specific clinical strain for a specific goal. That is where supplements become useful. A supplement may be more appropriate if you want a defined strain, a known CFU count, a more targeted goal, and easier consistency day to day. A food-first approach is still excellent for overall health, especially when combined with fiber-rich plant foods that help support the microbiome ecosystem. But if someone wants to replicate a research-based probiotic strategy, supplement selection becomes more important. How to choose a Lactobacillus Gasseri supplement. If you decide to try a Lactobacillus Gasseri supplement, how do you choose one intelligently? Here is a practical checklist. 1. Look for the full strain name. This is the most important step. You want more than Lactobacillus Gasseri. You want something like L. Gasseri SBT2055, L. Gasseri BNR17, L. Gasseri OLL2716, L. Gasseri CP2305. If the strain is not listed, the product is harder to evaluate against published research. 2. Match the strain to the goal for abdominal fat. Metabolic support. People usually discuss strains like SBT2055 or BNR17. For stomach health, H. pylori support. Dyspepsia. The research often points to OLL2716, LG21. For stress, sleep, gut-brain axis, the strain most often discussed is CP2305. For women's microbiome support, look for products specifically formulated and researched for that context. 3. Check the CFU count and serving instructions. More is not always better, but the dose should make sense. You want the product to tell you clearly how many live organisms are present and whether that number is guaranteed through expiration. 4. Pay attention to storage. Some probiotics need refrigeration, others are shelf-stable. What matters is whether the organism remains viable and well-preserved. 5. Consider delivery format. Capsule, sachet, fermented milk, yogurt drink, or symbiotic formula. All can matter depending on the product design. 6. Be skeptical of miracle claims. Any product claiming that one probiotic melts fat, fixes hormones, detoxes the body, and cures digestive disease is probably overselling. The best supplements usually sound more modest because they are closer to the evidence. Safety, side effects, and who should be cautious. Now let's talk safety. For most healthy people, probiotics such as Lactobacillus Gasseri are generally considered well tolerated. Clinical trials involving various L. Gasseri strains have been conducted in different populations, and the overall safety profile appears favorable in the typical healthy adult context. Possible side effects can include mild gas, bloating, temporary digestive adjustment, or changes in bowel habits. These effects are often mild and temporary, but not always. However, there are some groups who should be more cautious with probiotics in general. People who are severely immunocompromised, people with central lines, critically ill patients, or individuals with complex medical conditions. This does not mean probiotics are automatically dangerous, but it does mean supplements should be used thoughtfully and with professional oversight when risk factors are present. Also, if someone has severe digestive symptoms, blood in stool, unexplained weight loss, fever, severe pelvic symptoms, or persistent abdominal pain, that is a medical evaluation issue, not a just take a probiotic issue. Who may benefit most from Lactobacillus Gasseri? So, who might be the most interested in Lactobacillus Gasseri? Potentially, people interested in metabolic support or abdominal adiposity support, especially if they are looking at strains with actual published evidence. People looking for stomach-focused probiotic support, especially around H. pylori-associated discomfort or functional dyspepsia support. Women interested in microbiome support, especially in the context of products tailored to vaginal or urogenital wellness. People interested in the gut-brain axis, especially those who want to learn about stress-related gut wellness or sleep-related probiotic research. People looking for broader gut barrier and microbiome support, especially as part of a bigger routine including diet, fiber, and healthy habits. The people who may benefit least are those expecting a probiotic to replace all the basics. Because no probiotic can replace sleep, protein intake, exercise, fiber, hydration, or medical care when needed. A probiotic works best as part of a system. Final verdict. So, what's the final verdict on Lactobacillus gasseri? Here it is. Lactobacillus gasseri is one of the most interesting probiotic species in modern research, but its benefits are highly strain-specific. That is the core message. The strongest reasons people pay attention to it include promising evidence for abdominal adiposity support with certain strains like SBT2055, useful research in stomach health and H. pylori-related support with OLL2716, LG21, relevance to women's microbiome health, emerging evidence in stress and sleep support with CP2305, and broader interest in immune modulation and gut barrier integrity. What it is not is a miracle cure. It is not a license to ignore diet. It is not a replacement for treatment. It is not a guarantee that every capsule on the market works the same way. But if you choose a strain carefully, match it to your goal, and keep your expectations realistic, Lactobacillus gasseri may be a very worthwhile probiotic to know about, and that makes it far more interesting than the usual hype. If you want to understand how your body really works and the benefits of probiotics, subscribe to this channel because we turn complex scientific topics into simple and powerful information that you can actually use. And if you found this helpful, share it with someone who cares about their health.